Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. This week we're discussing a case that shocked the community to its core. Marty Bergen was a natural when it came to baseball, being called the kingpin of catchers. But then, tragedy struck, ending his career just as it was taking off. So I ask you all to join me as we remember the Bergen family. Martin Bergen, who went by Marty, was born on October 25, 1871, to parents Michael and Anne Delaney Bergen in North Brookfield, Massachusetts. Michael and Anne were Irish immigrants. They arrived in the United States just after the Civil War in 1865. Marty was one of 6 children. He was the third born and only one of 2 boys. To support his family, Michael worked in a shoe factory. Growing up, baseball was becoming the national game for the country, and Marty took to the sport. As a child, he played on Father James' team of altar boys, where he learned the game. Even though Marty was a great player, it seemed everywhere he went, trouble followed. During his time with the church team, Marty displayed tantrums. He would often be spotted throwing his gear to the ground and storming off when he felt another player received more praise than himself. He showed signs of moodiness, even at a young age, which affected his connections off the field. After his time with the church, he found a place with the local team, the Brookfields. He was described as argumentative towards his teammates, even getting into a fist fight during his first professional season. Marty started his professional baseball career in the minor league for Salem, Massachusetts in 1892. During his first season, he played 59 games and batted an average of .247. By the following season, Marty's skills as a catcher started to take notice while playing on a team in Northampton, Massachusetts. During this season, he met Harriet Gaines, who went by Hattie. Hattie was a stitcher at the Bachelor Shoe Factory in North Brookfield. The two married in July of 1893 and had 3 children together. Florence was born on October 4, 1894, William on January 29, 1895, and Joseph sometime in 1897. He bought a farm for his family 2 hours outside of North Brookfield that he nicknamed Snowball Farm. Snowball Farm cost $1,600 and was the one place Marty felt truly happy. In 1894, Marty was placed in Lewiston, Maine, where he played for another minor league, this time batting an average of .321 in 97 games. He was described as a phenomenal catcher, but quite cranky. According to news outlets at the time, Marty was so hard to get along with that hardly anyone could do it. Despite his attitude, Marty performed well during his time in Maine, and due to his performance, he was picked by 2 National League teams, the Washington Senators and the Kansas City Blues. Ultimately, manager Jimmy Manning signed him to the Kansas City Blues in the highly competitive Western League in 1895. The club president and his field manager quickly became exasperated with Marty's behavior, but he continued to play strong. Marty was moody and constantly expressed displeasure. He even walked away from the club at one point for over a week over what was described as a minor slight. With Kansas, he played 113 games and batted an average of .372. His time with Kansas proved he belonged on another level. By the end of the year, he was drafted by the Boston Beaneaters, also of the National League. This exchange occurred because of a recommendation to Boston's field manager, Frank Seeley. Pitcher Kid Nichols, a Kansas City native, saw Marty in action and felt he would be a perfect addition to the Boston team, since they recently lost their catcher, Charlie Bennett, and were on a losing streak. The Bostons gave Kansas $1,000 and shortstop Frank Connaughton for Marty. But Marty was not so convinced that Boston actually wanted him. He felt the team wouldn't use him appropriately, and he wanted to be paid more. At the time, the salary cap was $2,400 per player. Team owner Arthur Sawden traveled to his farm to convince him otherwise, and it worked. Marty played for the Boston team from 1896 to 1899. During his rookie season, he caught 65 games. With Marty on the team, they finished in 4th. During his 4 years with Boston, he caught 337 games and gained a reputation as one of the finest catchers in the league. In 1896, part of his season was lost due to an injury, but in 1897, he bloomed as a defensive catcher. Boston became one of the top 10 teams in the league. The next 2 years, they won the pennant. He played his best season in 1898, batting an average of .289 in 120 games, and earning the representation as the best field catcher in the game. By 1899, the team finished in second. Marty asserted himself as a respected and crucial member of one of the greatest teams of the 19th century, and was a favorite among fans. Despite his success on the field, off the field, Marty continued to have run-ins with his teammates and opponents alike. The newspapers referred to his demeanor as erratic and hostile. By the end of the 1898 season, he threatened the lives of many of his teammates over minor altercations. Many of the men were fearful of him and worried for their general safety. He assaulted several members of the team, including a pitcher named Vic Willis. On July 28, 1898, Marty was at breakfast at the Southern Hotel. The night prior, Marty, Vic, and other members were poking fun at each other. Eventually, Marty decided he didn't want to be a part of it anymore and wanted to be left alone. The next morning, Vic came to breakfast and sat next to Marty, who didn't want him near him, and when Vic refused to leave, Marty slapped him in the face. The men had to be pulled apart, and the news of the incident caused a stir in team morale and amongst the higher-ups. But they didn't want to trade Marty since he was one of their star players. By mid-season, the Boston team was so divided that it was the team against Marty. The tensions only worsened in 1899 when Marty suffered a hip injury that needed correction. Rumors spread he'd broken it, but the truth was he developed an abscess on his right hip that was surgically removed. So in January of 1899, his surgery was successful and took over 4 hours. Friends and family stated he seemed different mentally after the surgery, however. The condition only seemed to worsen and lead to more turmoil for the team. Marty started having hallucinations that enemies were trying to poison him. He sat sideways on the bench and walked in a particular way so he could spot any potential assassins. He spent time dodging invisible knife thrusts. They started the 1899 season playing 16 games on the road, and amid this trip, he received word that his eldest son, William, died of diphtheria. He was granted time home to recover and be with his family. He returned to the club just 2 weeks after his death. Marty was troubled by his death since he couldn't get home in time to attend his funeral. He continued to spiral, claiming his teammates continuously and maliciously reminded him of his son, which caused stress and sorrow. But this was just another of his hallucinations. On July 20th, 1899, the Boston team traveled by train to Cincinnati. While the other men were playing cards, Marty seemed withdrawn. When the train stopped in Washington, D.C., Marty hopped off, abandoning his team once again to return home. He was gone for over a week before an ex-player turned reporter interviewed him at his farm to see why he wouldn't come back. Marty stated he left because his teammates were hounding him, and they wanted to see him fail. He felt his team was avoiding him, and the manager wouldn't give him any time off to see his family. He was fined $300 for abandoning the club, which only dismayed him more. He also didn't like the tone of the telegram he received from the team owner during his absence. But at the top of his list of grievances was an injury he complained about. Marty claimed he injured his hand, and because of this, he needed to go home to see his lifelong friend and family physician, Dr. Louis Dion, because he could trust him. He did eventually return to the club, where he registered several complaints about his teammates, and his bizarre actions continued to take a toll on all of them. In September, he left the club again, returning home for a few days before coming back unannounced minutes before a game. At the end of the 1899 season, the Boston team were hoping he wouldn't return for the spring season. Wins or not, they felt their safety was compromised. Marty sought help for his moods and hallucinations from Dr. Dion and the family priest, but nothing seemed to work. He spoke to Dr. Dion extensively, where he expressed strange ideas and was afraid that he wasn't right in the head. He admitted he couldn't remember much from the last season, only that a man came up, congratulated him, then gave him a cigar, which he didn't smoke, fearing it was poisoned. He refused any medications provided by his doctor if he didn't mix it personally, because he didn't want to be poisoned. Marty believed the National League discovered that Dr. Dion was his physician, and they paid him to kill him. He felt that people in general were plotting against him. Dr. Dion prescribed bromides, a mild sedative that was commonly used to calm people down, since he felt his problem stemmed from his tobacco addiction. Marty chewed tobacco and smoked all of the time, and Dr. Dion suggested this contributed to his nervousness and anxiety. So Marty quit, and for a time he felt better, but he was not cured. He confessed to the doctor he wished he'd quit baseball so he could find peace. In their last conversation, Marty told Dr. Dion it was nice and pleasant, something he'd been missing in all of his other interactions. According to his doctor, Marty seemed fine, but according to his family, something was not okay. On the evening of Thursday, January 18, 1900, Marty enjoyed an evening at the farm with his family. Added to his stress, his father Michael was to move in that night, but due to an argument, Hattie would not allow him inside. The argument was so intense that she had to hide the shotgun they kept for home defense. By this time, Marty and his father were not getting along because of Michael's alleged drinking. So Michael decided to camp out in the barn while the situation cooled down. After a hearty meal, the children and Hattie retired for the evening, while Marty fell asleep on the couch. He woke up during the early hours of Friday morning to relight the stove. The stove was the only source of heat, so he scooped out the previous night's ashes and prepped it for fire by gathering old papers. He left the kitchen and went to the woodshed where he grabbed the axe to prepare the wood. But then, something within him snapped. Marty, armed with the axe, approached Hattie first in their bedroom. He struck her multiple times in the head with the blunt side of the axe. She died from a crushed skull. He then turned his attention to Joseph. He hit his son once with the blade side of the axe. Joseph died from the loss of blood due to the large head wound. Florence was found in the kitchen, where she was also struck multiple times in the head with the blunt end of the axe. Once he knew his family was gone, Marty then retrieved his straight razor and cut his own throat in the kitchen. He was found next to Florence on the floor. Michael woke up hours later, where he went to the house only to find the front door was locked. It was odd since at this hour, the Bergen family was usually up and ready for the day. Michael decided to leave the quiet house alone and start on the farm chores by milking the cows. By noon, he noticed the house was still dark, so he let himself in through the shed where he stumbled upon the carnage. On July 20th, the Bergen family were laid out in their home for family and friends to view and pay their respects. The news of the massacre shocked the community since Marty was described as a doting father and husband. He was gentle, a core member of the community, and passionate about his faith. They couldn't understand why he would have done it. The bodies were transported to St. Joseph's Church for the funeral ceremonies. The Bergen family was buried at the North Brookfield St. Joseph Cemetery. After the funeral, Dr. Dion repeatedly made comments that Marty Bergen was insane, but he believed it was out of his hands. Years later, Marty's case was examined by Dr. Salzman of Harvard Medical School. He believed Marty likely suffered from schizophrenia with possible manic depression, something not commonly treated during his lifetime. Treatment for mental illness was to lock the person in a hospital for the rest of their days. In the wake of the tragedy, North Brookfield made efforts to better educate professionals and the community about mental health illnesses. After his death, Marty received a few Hall of Fame votes from 1937 to 1939, but not enough to be elected. He continued to be admired as one of the finest catchers in the National League during his tenure. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, so leave them below and we can chat about this case. If you found this to be informative, please consider giving the video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more from me. And lastly, if you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. Thank you so much for all of your love and support. I hope you have a great week ahead of you, because you deserve it. But for now, we must part ways. So stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.